Hello, and welcome to the Simply Business Interview Podcast, a podcast created by business owners for business owners. I am your host, John Jennings. And I believe that most business owners are working way too hard for much too little. And one of our issues is that we overcomplexify things. I believe the answers are almost always within us or within our reach. I like to say that I'm a simple man with simple ideas. So welcome to Simply Business. Today, I am joined by James Fender, who is a co-owner of Grimes Pools in Bloomington, Indiana. James, welcome to the program. Tell us a little bit about what you do and with Grimes Pools, and tell us a little bit about that business.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So we're a full service swimming pool and spa company. We specialize in in-ground pools. We do what in the industry would be called kit pools, or steel walls with a vinyl liner. That's kind of our bread, and that's where we like to be, because there's some specifics about that type of pool for this part of the country and the weather patterns and stuff that we have that we feel makes it the strongest option. So yeah, that's what we do. But I do all my own design work in-house. All of the construction is done in-house. We full service, so we not only build and sell new swimming pools, but we service and maintain existing swimming pools. So lots of things on them need fixed at times. So we do all that. We have a weekly maintenance department that goes out and is basically your pool boy situation, where we like to take ours kind of the next level, and we call it like a white glove service, where when you want to use your pool, it's ready for you, and that's all you're required to do is use it, and we take care of everything else: chemicals, maintenance. If your deck needs pressure washed, we just take care of it. If your furniture needs rearranged, and you want it moved, we'll take care of that, clean out the drains and stuff like that. So we try to offer more than just the sort of basic service. We try to be the premium offering for not only the pools that we build, but the maintenance department. We try to be sort of the top tier.
And not everybody wants to do that part, right? That's
right.
It's a lot of the grunt work, the kind of the building the pools and the pool houses and the decks. That's all the sexy work, right?
Yeah. Well, it's funny, you get companies that specialize in one or specialize in the other, and they don't want to do both,
right?
Because it's a lot different work. The construction stuff is construction, and the maintenance, the guys that I hire, I have to hire them specifically for this side of it or that side of it. We're in backyards of multi-million-dollar houses, with the homeowners there, their kids there. So some of the guys that I hire for construction would not be a good fit to put in the, where it's, where there's, clean concrete and a clean pool and, customers present. So, in fact, that's one of the challenges that we've faced recently that people may not think about is, everybody has Ring cameras now. So the type of humor that would normally take place on a construction site, some of those guys have, colorful language, and the jokes they tell aren't always appropriate for everybody. So I have to constantly remind guys, like, you have to operate as though the homeowner is here listening to you, because there's probably a camera out here somewhere. And, they're probably looking at it to see how you guys carry on. And when you say something, that is meant for humor, it might not be interpreted well. So you guys need to think about that stuff. So, the modern day construction site's a little different than what we grew up on. So,
very, very interesting. So, you're a family business. Tell us a little bit about that history of how y'all came about.
So my grandpa and my uncle actually started the business in 1974. They went in. My grandpa kind of started. He bought. It was a what you call a franchise, like a franchise of a nationwide. They had sort of like kits that were pre-designed floors and pre-designed. Everything was pre-designed. You just sold. They told you the pricing and everything, and you just sold it, and then they would ship you all the parts, and you put it together. And it was a very cookie cutter process. So it was kind of meant to be anybody could pick up that business, as a franchise should be,
Yeah.
that anybody could sort of plug themselves in with a minimal amount of experience, and take over that. So my grandfather had an opportunity to buy it. At the time, he had an existing plumbing company, so it was sort of a natural fit because a lot of what we do is the plumbing around the pool. So he bought it during a slow season with the plumbing company, to sort of supplement his income. Well, just about the time that he started selling pools, he got a big contract for the plumbing company that was going to require all of his work. Well, he had brought his son in, my uncle, to help him just sell the pools. He was just supposed to sell them and make a commission off the sales because he was actually going into sales for an airline at the time. And so he kind of, as a summer job, got into that. And then the next thing you know, my grandpa told my uncle, like, you're either going to have to figure out how to build them or you're going to have to give people their money back because I can't build them now. So he basically just dropped the business in his son's lap and said, here, it's yours. So, either give them their money back or learn how to build pools. So my uncle decided he was going to learn how to build pools. And so that was in 1974, and it was a rocky start.
Yeah. Sounds like it.
Yeah. So his first three pools, it's an interesting story because I think most people would have given up because when we first started building them, they were Hallmark was the brand of pool, and it was fiberglass walls with a poured concrete floor. Well, the thing about a concrete pool and a fiberglass pool, one of the reasons that we use steel with vinyl is they can float out of the ground. So when the pool is empty, it's a big giant bowl in the ground. Well, if you get a lot of rain and the groundwater is higher than the water in the pool, the hydrostatic pressure wants to push that vessel up out of the ground and fill that space. So it either cracks the walls and fills the pool with water, or it lifts the bottom. And so the first three pools that he built, he had in the ground, and we had a torrential rain in Indiana, and all three of them cracked their bottoms. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
First three pools that he built. So, and it was just him and two guys building them. So he had to continue working on his other work, but that meant that after his, 8 to 5 construction day in the field, he had to go to those first three with a grinder, an angle grinder, and grind out all the cracks by hand and patch them all by hand. And so he spent weeks and weeks of evening time, away from his sons. He was a single father at the time, and he went out and just did every bit of it by himself and just stuck with it. And one benefit I think that we have, and we've seen a lot of it. In fact, I just had a conversation with a customer this morning about sort of the proliferation of these pop-up outfits, especially post-COVID. There was such a huge demand for pools that a lot of people that really didn't have any business being in the business decided they could, I can manage that. I can do that. I can set a fiberglass tub. And so, they'll sell pools and then they'll get themselves in trouble, and they tend to just walk away, let the insurance clean it up or let somebody else finish the job. And, it leaves the homeowners in a really bad spot. And the customer I was talking to this morning, we were actually talking, I just seen a news article about one of these guys that was out of like northern Kentucky, which is a few hours south of us, but he actually got prison time because he had accepted, down payments from people and then had disappeared without doing the work. And so we've seen a lot of that. And what I say all that to say that I think the benefit that we've had and why we've had such good longevity and why our reputation is as good as it is because we just were never wired that way to walk away. Whatever it took. It's just like, we've got a pretty healthy general liability plan that covers, mistakes and, errors and omissions type of thing for pool builders. If we do something and it's a costly repair, we could submit a claim and they pay for the repairs or stuff like that. If we ever get in a real bad spot, the insurance steps in so we don't lose everything. But we've never made a claim since 1974 on our general liability because we just always go back. If there's something wrong, we go back and fix it.
Yeah.
So, if it means we're working after hours to go grind out concrete floors, or we're going and cutting out concrete and fixing plumbing that, failed earlier than it should have, or whatever it is, we've just always stood behind our work,
Yeah.
So
But it sounds like you started with a pretty high work ethic of your uncle. I mean, just that story of going back and working a second, basically a
yeah,
second shift,
yeah,
to you know, when people come to me and talk to me about starting a business, uh, this is the stuff that they don't think about, right?
yeah, yeah,
When you start a business, you're you're unless you just know that business intricately
yeah,
or maybe you've worked in it for 10 years and you've got all the experience, but so many times like this, you're starting something new. And
yeah.
I've seen a number of people who have started a business and found out, wow, they didn't know everything they
Yeah,
they
well,
thought they did.
yeah, well, and like your point there, it's not what you know, it's what you don't know that gets you. And
Yeah,
the scary
exactly.
part is what you don't know that you don't know. The stuff
Yeah,
that you find out that you didn't know the day of, it's like, oh, I didn't even know I needed to do that. Like it's
yeah,
that's kind of a
yeah. We actually talked about the four levels of knowledge, and it's one is you start with you don't know what you don't know. That's the most dangerous. Then
yeah.
you don't know what you know. I'm going to mess up the order, but but we go through this. We eventually get to the point where we don't know what we know, meaning we act unconsciously because we know it so well.
Oh yeah.
But the most dangerous part is when you're at the start, when you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the trickiest part to be in.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So your uncle
Yeah.
survives those first few years, sticks with it, builds the
Yeah.
business. You and your cousins, I guess.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's his son and his stepson. So yeah,
right.
when I say his stepson, it's been his stepson
Yeah,
for most of my life. So I
right,
mean, it's my cousin.
right.
But yeah, so there's myself, and then there's Daniel and Jeremy, and yeah, so it worked out well because Daniel and Jeremy were already in the business, working in the business. They've got over 20 years each in the business. I'm the new one. I'm just under 10 years with the
Mhm.
business. But the no, that's not right. It'd be yeah, no, that's right. Sorry, I had to
Time flies, right?
it does, and it's funny how it contracts and expands as we get older. Um, but so they'd been in the business for over 20 years each. Jeremy has always focused on the maintenance. He's a very clean cut guy, well spoken. The customers really like him, especially like the housewives, just because the way he presents himself.
Right.
Like he's been invited to kids' birthday parties, like because the kids will be out there using the pool while he's out there cleaning around it,
Yeah,
and
gets to
he'll
know
grab
them.
one of them and throw it in, or he'll throw on his trunks and go down the slide with them, or I mean, it's just
Yeah,
he makes time for the customers, and like it leaves an impression, and he's just always had that. He's really good at that,
yeah.
um, and he's great with kids. He's got two daughters, and then I've got two daughters too, and they like Uncle Jeremy as much as they like their dad, I think, because he just he always makes time. If we're
He's the fun
neighbors,
uncle.
yeah, we're neighbors, and if they're out playing on the basketball court and he comes by, he makes time to
Yeah.
to play with them and stuff, and they like that. So Jeremy's really good with people, so he's on the people facing side. That's maintenance. Daniel is good at fixing things and figuring out problems, so he's always been on the service side, like especially
Mhm.
like installing the cover systems. It's a mechanical system, and so that's been Daniel's specialty for. In fact, we're one of the only local companies that does their own cover installs. Most sub that out to the manufacturer. They have an installation department. So, but we actually do all of our own installs and all of our own service, all of our own warranty work. So Daniel was already very much plugged into the service side, fixing things, mechanical stuff. Um, I came from some management experience. And so Rich recognized that he had two boys that were capable of doing a lot of the work, but he
Mhm.
needed somebody that could sort of manage the business and do the business
Yeah.
of business. And so I didn't know at the time that he had those thoughts. He just had told me that his pardon me, indigestion, but he had told me that his office manager was leaving, and he wanted somebody that could come in and just do, accounts receivable, accounts payable, that kind of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
he offered me a position, and I came in, and like I said, little did I know he already had thoughts about, bringing me in as a third partner. So he brought me in, and we tried it for a couple months, and it was a good fit. And so then he basically offered me the opportunity to buy in as a one third partner, which was, I mean, it was surprising.
Mm-hmm.
He's my uncle, but he's my, retired Marine uncle. So he's the one that, he wasn't like the friendly uncle. He wasn't, yeah. I didn't even know he liked me. But yeah, he trusted me to come in and work with his two sons and fit in with them. And even at that point, like he really saw me more as like an office management, type of
Yeah.
person. And then he got into, so his part of the job had always been the sales and design and the construction of the new pools. Well,
Mm-hmm.
neither one of the boys had really leaned into that.
Yeah.
It's a little more demanding work. You spend a lot more time with a shovel in your hand than you do on the other two jobs. So it's dirty and hot work sometimes, especially since most of our work is in the summer. Um, so he saw that I had an aptitude for the office stuff, but he needed somebody that he could train to fill his chair when he retired. And so he sort of floated the idea, thinking that one of his two sons would fill that role. And it just didn't seem to be a good fit with either one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just sort of by default, he said, well, hey, come out and, I'm going to show you the drawing process. Now he's still like, so for like pet projects or special projects, like we've got customers that have bought 4 swimming pools from us,
Oh,
and
wow.
they come in, they've worked with Rich 3 times before, or 4 times before. They really want Rich's design work. And so they will come in and they'll say, hey, is there any chance that Rich can do my pool design? And of course, he's tickled to death to be thought of in such high
Mm-hmm.
regard that so he's doing one now, but he still does everything with a pencil and paper and a drawing board. He goes
Sure.
out to the yard with a table, a collapsible table, and sets up, a drawing board with big sheet of paper and takes all of his measurements, and it's 1/4 inch scale, and still does it all by
Wow.
hand.
Old school. Yeah.
Old school, yeah. Well, and he would not pass the torch until I was able to do what he does the way that
Yeah.
he does it. And he made a really compelling argument to me that he said, I know there's software that will do a lot of this work for you, that will take out the busy work of the design. But you have to understand how it fits in real space before you can
Yeah.
rely on the computer to do the stuff for you. Otherwise, how will you ever know if there's something wrong with the software if you're not able to check against it? And
Mhm.
so I said, I respected that. And so
Yeah.
I went out with him and I learned it, and I I took it serious, and so I showed him that I was capable and willing to learn. I spent a lot of time with him on sales calls, a lot of time just listening. I carried things in, I listened, and I carried things out. I just put myself in the shadows and listened to how he formed his sales pitch and the arguments for and against certain things that he made and the pluses and minuses of different design elements and stuff, and really just listened a lot and tried to glean as much as I could. And then I think the first opportunity he gave me to sort of have a little more input in one of those meetings, I think he was really pleasantly surprised because he didn't realize that I was so intentional about
Mm.
mimicking his style and really like ingesting the knowledge that I was gaining from those meetings. And so
Yeah.
we walked out, and I mean, it was probably the nicest he's ever been to me. Like he was really, which felt great, like, hey, I just
Yeah.
wanted his approval, like,
Yeah.
so. And I think from then on, he really took it serious that I could fill that role and
Yeah.
still do the other role. So from that moment, I think he had kind of, it was hard for him to let go. I mean, he had a lot of years building this business,
Sure.
he wanted to make sure that it was going to be with somebody that he could trust to do it right and really like follow
Yeah.
his
But I
path.
mean, he's been in the business over 50 years now.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
we
We just
don't
had our
we
50-year
don't we
anniversary.
don't see that very often, you know. So
Yeah,
that's it.
yeah.
Do you
And
came
still
from
love that.
a management, more of an office type background before?
Yeah, so well, I had done plumbing because so my mom actually bought the plumbing business from my
Oh,
grandfather.
okay.
He wanted to retire. So I had grown up plumbing, but then I my mom ended up selling that business and I was too young to buy it when she sold it. And so I had gone, honestly, I started out at a restaurant just because I didn't have anywhere else to go. And so,
Hmm.
but within, just a few months, I sort of had an aptitude for it and ended up as a general manager. So
Okay.
that's where most of my management experience comes from is honestly from managing a restaurant. But
Okay.
it's still inventory control and labor management. And so, a lot of,
Yeah.
you know,
So you leave that, which that's what I've spent some time in restaurant management as well, so I know
yeah.
know what you're talking about working with them. But you make this switch over, this completely different business. What were some of the early challenges you faced, or were you just driven by the challenge itself?
Yeah, well, I've always enjoyed, learning a new thing. So, I get, I call it nerding out. I find something that interests me and then I just dive into it headlong.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
there was some of that. It was something new to learn. And so a lot of the things that I got into just, it's been my free time reading about this type of product or that type of application. And so I got interested in it like that. But as far as like the surprises, uh, the it's building swimming pools is a very sort of unique construction, just in the fact that we're really trying to design something where you don't see any of the work when it's done,
Hmm.
and so and there's just a lot of stuff that goes into it. You have to have a big giant structure with a bunch of holes in it that's still waterproof, so there's some unique challenges there. Uh, but then like concrete and then like learning like how I think the one that surprised me the most was my uncle described a swimming pool as a dam. He said, we're building a dam in their yard. And I said, what do you mean? He said, we're where we're going to be at, the water can't flow in the yard. So we're creating a giant obstacle to wherever groundwater is going to be, wherever rainwater is going to run. So the one of the biggest parts of our job is controlling water, rainwater and surface water, so that we actually can not create problems. Because if I put a pool next to a house and I set it up incorrectly, I'm going to flood their basement every time it rains, or
Right.
I'm going to create a situation where dirty water is always running onto their deck and into their pool, ruin their chemistry and their pool will never be clean. So there's a lot of, as far as setting grades and elevations, controlling surface water and having a product that at the end you can do the grade work around it and the water stays off the deck and stays off the yard and stays out of the basement, that kind of thing. So
Mm.
I wasn't really expecting to have to think about that as much as I have to think about that. So
Yeah.
that's kind
Interesting.
of step one when you're laying out a pool is like, we can put one anywhere, but what is the result after the pool is there? What challenges are going to be created by the pool being there, and
Yeah.
how do we stay ahead of those from the very first pencil to paper of doing a design? Like you kind of have to have a plan for that before you even start, so.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fascinating. I've never put in a pool, but I just imagine, just from doing small projects in my backyard, the challenges that water and roots and everything else you run
Yeah,
into causes problems. It just has to be on a ginormous scale.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, Southern Indiana, the big one is limestone.
Rock. Yeah.
Yeah, we hit
We
rock.
got it's in Kentucky too.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
I'm like, no, I can't plant that tree here. Let me move over 5 feet. Nope, nope, not, keep going.
Yeah, somebody asked me earlier this season, well, what do you do if you hit rock? I said, we get a really big hammer and we bust it out of the way, you know. It's They said a hammer. I said, well, it goes on the end of a big piece of equipment.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, basically big giant hydraulic jackhammer. And
Yeah.
you start.
Bust it up. Yeah. I've
Yeah.
seen some pretty big rocks come out of some neighborhoods
Oh yeah.
around here. It's
Oh
crazy.
yeah. It's funny because that's one of the things I learned from my uncle from going on sales calls was when we pull in the driveway, we call them floaters. So you get these big boulders. So you got bedrock, but then just above bedrock, you've got sort of the pieces that didn't become part of the bedrock or have
Mhm.
broken off the bedrock and sit just above the bedrock. So
Yeah.
they're floating above the bedrock, but these can be the size of a car,
Right.
and so the funny thing is, if somebody builds a house and they hit a bunch of floaters or they hit stone in their basement, they're really neat looking rocks. So almost always the homeowner will keep one and they
Mhm.
almost always put it at the base of the driveway. It's just a thing.
Yeah.
If you pull into a neighborhood and you see a bunch of these limestone boulders at the end of the driveway, all those houses dug those out of their basement.
Right.
And that tells you, so if you pull in a driveway and you see a big floater at the end of the driveway, count on hitting rock.
Yeah.
It's a good early warning signal. Most people buy those boulders and bring them in. They came out when the house was built. So
Right.
well, we got floaters on the driveway, so uh, probably going to
Uh,
hit stone on this one. Plan for that.
That's that's a good example of just experience.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh, fool me once, but you've
Oh yeah.
right, hit it several times. Well, let's go back to the family component because one of the things that we talked about before, and I think is interesting because I work with a lot of family businesses, and there's this whole thing of do it, is my son or daughter going to be interested in the business? Are they going to want the business? Um, I see people have like really successful businesses and like their kids are like, no, I saw you working your tail off for 40 years. I don't,
Yeah. No, I'm definitely.
I don't want that business or whatever. Right. And so you grew up with your grandparents and your uncles and your mom, all these people owning businesses. Um, but you kind of went a different way for a while into restaurants, then you came back into the family business.
Yeah.
And, and you shared with me your thoughts about your children and what you hope for them. So talk
Yeah.
about that
So
for a second.
yeah. So the reason that I went a different direction was because, you know, I mean, I guess nepotism is a dirty word, but I mean, working in a family business. So I worked for my mom at the plumbing business, and I kind of got, I think, it's divided in, depending on, the father, the mother, whoever the parents that own the business, they bring their kids in, and I think it can go kind of one of two ways, and it's either they're pushed to excel because of more is expected of them, or they're given a cushioned existence, right? So, and I've seen both play out in my family. Well, I got the pushed and held to a higher standard
Yeah.
experience, which was good for me, but it also wasn't pleasant. And part of the unpleasantness was no matter what standard you were held to, your coworkers always just assumed that you got that other experience, that you were
Right.
allowed to get away with more, you were probably making more than they did, you got better benefits than they did. None of that was true. I was literally the lowest paid guy when I worked for my
Yeah.
mom. And she um, I wasn't like, it was a I remember the first time she fired me for showing up late, and
Mm.
but I showed up the same time that a bunch of other people showed up. And, she used me to make an example because, you know, she knew it would be easier to bring me back later than to risk losing one of the guys that was valuable to her. So she
Mm.
fired me and she let me go get a different job for about 6 months before she let me come
Wow.
back. And so there were a lot of those stories. It's just like, there was an emergency service department, and if nobody else wanted this was the days of pagers. If nobody wanted the pager for the weekend, it fell in my lap and I wasn't
Mm.
allowed to say no. So everybody else
Yeah.
could refuse it. I was never allowed to refuse it. So, which again was good for me. I learned discipline and fortitude, and also made a lot of money because, you know, the emergency service paid good. So,
Mhm.
you know, there were a lot of little things like that that just made me say, you know, I'm a pretty capable guy. I think if I went just about anywhere and put my mind to it, and had a fair shake and a fair starting spot, I'm going to excel. I'm going to do well. But here I have to do a half measure more just to
Mhm.
break even, you know.
Yeah.
So for me, having seen that side of it personally, but then also seeing the way other people in my family have had their businesses, and treated their kids and given them more of the other experience, and how
Mhm.
that's sort of been detrimental to them in the long run. Like their life
Yeah.
was easier, but at the same time, like, you know, um, they don't have the stick to itiveness, you know, or whatever, they don't have that fortitude of, you know, chewing through a bad situation because you just got to get through it, you know. So for me, I never wanted my kids to work for me in any business that I had, just because I never wanted to have to decide if I was going to be harder on them, which
Yeah.
that's definitely the tact I would take. But even knowing that, even if I do that, they're still going to be looked at differently by their coworkers, you know,
Yeah.
because I experienced that personally. And
Yeah.
so, you know, and then trying to discern, am I showing favoritism? Am I being too hard on them? You know, I've got one of my cousin's sons that works for us now, and I do find that I'm harder on him than I am on the other guys. The things that I
Mhm.
ignore out of other guys, I always will call him out on. And, you know, and I've explained it to him. I've pulled him aside and said, Jonathan, look, you know, like, you're the only one here with the right last name. To, you know, you're the only one here with the, you know, the name on the building is your last name. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm going to hold you to a higher standard. I expect more out of you. So you'll see that I'm calling you out on things that I don't call other people out on. You know, in fact, Jonathan got the day off today because he was late. So he got sent home. He wasn't the only one that was late, but he was the only one that got sent home.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, like I
Well,
find
tough
it's a
love
full
there.
circle, you know. I didn't fire him, but we did give him the day off, um, and it's just so it's just, I didn't want my kids to work here because I wanted them to go out and learn those lessons from somebody that it didn't have to be administered by me, you
Yeah.
know.
So, and maybe you don't want to answer this publicly, but you know, so let's say one of them goes off, works for 10 years or so, maybe in a similar related kind of industry and gets some good experience and comes back and says, I want to end the family business.
Yeah, then I'm stoked. Yeah, I want them
Yeah.
to get that foundational experience first,
Okay.
where, because to me it's almost that, like when I came to work for my uncle, like, and I'd come up under my mom, but I'd also gone out and worked on my own. And so when I
Mhm.
came back, I knew how to act as an employee. And,
Right.
you know, I'm afraid that if my children started out here, they would never know what it was like to have, you know, a real job or a regular
Yeah.
job or a job outside of the family. So they would never be able to weigh, you know, what would be acceptable somewhere else versus what would be acceptable here.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I want them to learn how to be a good employee. And then when they come here, then they know how to act appropriately as a good employee
Yeah.
without me having to teach them those lessons, and without me having to, you know, it's just, you know, family businesses are challenging because the things that I could say to a stranger that was only a business partner, or that conversation's a lot easier with somebody that isn't my cousin and also my next door neighbor, you know.
Yeah.
So when my business partner that's my cousin does something that's bad for the business, having to approach them and address that issue with them has a whole nother layer of, you know, stickiness to it. That,
Mhm.
you know, it's like, it's close to Christmas. Do I want to wait until after New Year's to have this conversation? Because
Right.
this might cause a stink at Christmas, you know, like,
Yeah.
so, you know, there's just, and then, you know, and it's just, it's like, it, it just always seems that it's easier to be hard on the ones that are close to us, you know, whether it's a spouse or a child or whatever. It's easier for us to be short with them, it seems like, or
Mhm.
easier for us to get our feelings involved,
Yeah.
seems like. So
Yeah. I know from some of my clients in the family that are family businesses, they have to really put, barriers, I guess, or
absolutely.
stay in their lane,
Boundaries.
like, Sunday dinner is Sunday dinner. That's family. We don't talk about what happened, during the week.
Yeah.
Things like that are good practices to have, because otherwise if you don't have those boundaries, you're gonna.
Yeah, and it's hard. Even when you go into it knowing that you need to have that, it's hard to maintain it.
Yeah.
So it's just like when we bought the business from my uncle, it was, my uncle was ready to just do, this sort of impromptu handshake deal. And I said, and both of his sons were fine with that because they didn't know better. And I said,
Mm,
hold on, Uncle Rich. I said, we've got to get this in, like,
yeah.
good fences make good neighbors and good contracts make good business partners. Like,
Yeah.
we need every eventuality spelled out so that
Yeah.
we're all on the same page as far as expectations and being able, there's going to come a time where we disagree on things. And if we don't have it mapped out and planned out and a disposition or at least a mode of disposing of the issue pre-planned and pre-described, then
Mhm.
that leaves too much room for emotion. Like,
Yeah.
we need it spelled out because that's what will keep us from fighting when we can open up a buy-sell agreement, or we can open up a handbook and say, look, these are the things that we all agreed to at the beginning, so that this is how we're going to handle it.
Yeah.
Whether it falls in your favor or my favor, it doesn't matter. This is what we agreed to, so this is what we need to do. Without having to try to figure out a solution and compromise on things that we shouldn't compromise on, or let things go that we shouldn't let go. So yeah, I was kind of adamant that no, we need a lawyer, we need an evaluation, like,
Yeah.
and he's like, you think I'm trying to cheat you? I said, no, absolutely not. No, that's not it at all. It honestly has nothing to do between us buying the business so much as it does, how does my relationship with my two partners look in the future? But also, yeah, I mean, there's a certain part of it, Uncle Rich, that, you know, after, it's hard to retire from something you've built for 50 years.
Yeah.
And you may want to be more involved than we want you to be. Or it could go the other way, it could be that, we expect you to help us through the transition, and you decide the day you get paid that you're done, and just here you go. I mean, I
Right.
don't think that that's the way you would think, because I'm more concerned about the other, where,
Mm.
5 years from now, you're still here every day, and we're ready for you to not be here trying to run things,
Right.
like, at what point do we take over the decision making, and at what point do you become an employee of the company as a consultant or whatever? Like, that all needs to be mapped out so that we know going forward, like, this is, we're going to do so many months of this and so many months of that and so many months. And then while we're all cool headed and sitting around the table agreeing with each other, we make those decisions at a good time instead of trying to figure them out
Mhm.
when we want to beat each other up,
Yeah. Yeah.
So, um, it
Well,
just,
yeah.
yeah, just trying to make smart choices ahead of time, and
Yeah.
but it's tricky. Even having the conversation where I say, well, I want to do smart things up front to avoid hurt feelings later, causes a certain amount of hurt feelings
Sure.
to, just by saying it's a necessity. Like, it's like, no, I'm not implying that, there's going to be bad. I just, I would rather be ahead of the opportunity for bad, and have
Yeah.
a plan for it just in case, you know.
Yeah. Well, Jamie, you've shared just a wealth of knowledge and experience on family businesses, and that was the dynamic I was mostly interested in today. Is
Yeah,
just hearing how that works, because every family business is different, but they all share a lot of these same problems,
yeah.
and you've faced them faced them straight up. I think it's you've shown a lot of wisdom in
Oh,
how
thank you.
you did that, and I guess you're kind of technically a third generation, but really a second generation
Yeah, yeah,
business. But you got, potential for a third generation coming, and it gets harder to keep extending that out.
yeah.
So I wish you the best success of that going forward. If someone's in the Bloomington area and wants a pool, how do they find you guys?
Yeah, so grimespools.com. We've got a website, and there's a contact me page on there, or our phone number. We have a phone number that goes all the way back to when there were still letters on the phone. So
Oh yeah.
yeah. So our phone number is actually 812-336-POOL. So
There you go.
but it's 7665, but yeah, it spells pool. But yeah, usually Googling us seems to be the easiest way anymore. That's what everybody's familiar with. Look us up online. Our numbers in there, our addresses on there. So yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on the program and sharing your story. It's been a great one to share.
Yeah, well, thanks, like I said, for having me. It's been a fun experience.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you liked it, please share or like it on whatever platform you use. You can find me on social media. On most platforms, I'm John K. Jennings. My first book is also available. Your Baby is Ugly tells you about 10 truths that business owners need to hear, but often won't, and how to overcome them. You can find it on Amazon. Just search for Your Baby is Ugly. And be watching for our next episode, where I'll interview another business owner who will share their stories and insights into what it's like to create a great business.